Let's move on to Shutter Island.
Oh, man.
Directed by Martin Scorsese in 2010. Script written by Leda Kalogridis, based on the novel by Dennis Lehane, who's well known for writing stories based in Massachusetts or New England like Gone Baby Gone and Mystic River. Shutter Island is about the implausible escape of a murderer, which brings U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and his new partner Mark Ruffalo, to Ashcliff Hospital, a fortress-like insane asylum located on a remote, windswept island. The woman appears to have vanished from a locked room, and there are hints of terrible deeds committed within the hospital walls. As the investigation deepens, Teddy realizes he will have to confront his own dark fears if he hopes to make it off the island alive.
Now, this isn't a traditional prison movie. They're not in an actual prison, but we felt that since every inmate at the institution committed crimes of some nature, that's why they're there. So we felt that it fit the bill to put it in this episode.
Also, it takes place in high security. Again, there are prison rooms in like the high security cells.
Yeah.
It's a fortress-like insane asylum. And yes, it's not technically a prison, but this also involves people who are imprisoned by their minds.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a different form of prison. In our perspective, it counts as a prison movie.
And we want to talk about it, so we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, so you know what? If you can't handle Shutter Island being our prison movie, you gotta fucking shut this off.
No, keep listening, please.
Please listen and leave a 5-star review. Anyways.
So ultimately, I think the main theme of this movie is sometimes we can blind ourselves to the truths of the world in order to believe what we want to believe, because it can be less painful than the truth.
Yeah, it's also coming to grips with your sin and your mistakes and your reality, and not hiding from your past and accepting your past. And this is a truly terrific film. I think it's underrated in Martin Scorsese's catalog because, again, he's made so many goddamn movies.
Oh, absolutely.
But this, I feel like people don't even think of in his top 5. And it also has one of the most shocking twist endings you'll ever see. If you've never read the book or never seen the movie, this movie has a crazy twist. So if you've not seen this movie, I really suggest pausing right now, go and watch Shutter Island, then come back and listen to our review ASAP.
We'll give you 2 hours to pause.
Because we're going to spoil some goddamn fucking shit, all right?
Yeah. So I think, obviously, like you said, I also think this is a vastly underrated movie for Scorsese, and also one of DiCaprio's best performances. And this is one of my favorite collaborations between them out of their 5 or 6 movies they've made. It's such a great psychological thriller. It has a lot of horror to it, and it keeps you guessing the whole time. You're on edge the whole time, especially the first time you watch it. And Scorsese used so many incredibly smart directing techniques to keep the audience on the edge of their seats.
Yeah, this is like Martin Scorsese uses a lot of effects and green screen nowadays, like especially with Wolf of Wall Street. He used a ton of green screen for that movie. But this film is full of special effects shots. I think there's over 600 or 650 special effects shots.
Oh, yeah.
And these shots are Scorsese used to give specific sequences like a dreamlike quality and like a fantastical element, rather than special effects are generally used to make you believe that something's real, like believe that, Iron Man's really flying through the sky. They want it to look real.
He's not.
Whereas Scorsese, with this film, uses his special effects to make it seem not real at times.
Exactly, because Teddy hallucinates, and in order to make hallucinations, they have to be pretty fantastical looking.
Yeah, so Scorsese wanted to create this artificiality to help put us in the mind of Teddy. Like, there's lots of shots where the background looks like way too fake to be real. Sometimes the audio isn't perfectly in sync with some of the audio because it shows like how Teddy is interpreting people's dialogue. The sound mixing also, sometimes things are way louder than they should be or not loud enough. Like waves might be too loud than what they look like, or the rain droplets, there isn't enough. There's just a couple, sounds like leaking faucets rather than a bunch of pouring drops everywhere. So he messes with your head like that to put you again in the shoes of Teddy.
And ultimately, the reason for this is because Teddy is an unreliable protagonist.
So Teddy is played, of course, by Leo DiCaprio, and this is a fantastic role by him. Of course, he's terrific in everything he does. And we immediately get a sense of what you just said, like being a flawed character. The opening scene of Teddy looking in the mirror on the ship and puking. And to me, Teddy does this because he looks at himself in the mirror. It's not because of seasickness. It's because when he sees himself, he can't take who he is. He can't take his reality because of what he's done in his past. And this is what forced him to vomit.
That's a good point. I can see that. I see him getting seasick as Because throughout the film, we see that he is an intense and severe aversion towards water, where he can't stand it. We'll reveal why, but water is an incredible burden on him. Being around it, seeing it, having it fall on him through rain or shower, it's an extremely painful experience for him.
Yeah, so Teddy is a U.S. Marshal, again, who is investigating this missing murder from Ashcliff Asylum. And he becomes highly suspicious of a possibly nefarious behavior at Shutter Island during his investigation with him and his partner Chuck. He begins to question the guards, the nurses, even Dr. Colley, played by the amazing Ben Kingsley. And Teddy personally becomes connected to the asylum, where he finds out that the man who killed his wife and kids in a fire is prisoner at Shutter Island, Andrew Latus. Conspiracy riddles Teddy's mind as he soon finds himself on the run from the staff, and he attempts to expose their supposed lies and conspiracy.
Yeah, so Andrew Latus, we learned from Teddy, burned down his home. He's a convicted arsonist who killed Teddy's family through burning their house down. And also, Scorsese turns us against the hospital immediately, just like Teddy. He puts us right into Teddy's perspective towards the hospital, because and he does this really simply. It's just filmmaking. Very intimidating framing of his cameras, especially when we're on the island for the first time and approaching the confines of the institution. And while he's doing these incredibly framed shots, he uses this incredibly menacing, disturbing, frightening score by Penderecki, which makes it feel as though the hospital is an evil place. And then Teddy even says to Chuck, as they're being driven over, he sees the barbed wire atop the walls surrounding the hospital, and he says, "I've seen something like this before." And he's referring to the Nazi prison camp that he saw when he was in the war. So he's comparing the mental institution to a prison camp, and so by doing this, he makes the audience feel like this is a place that's evil, that has bad things happening within it. So we're already been turned against this hospital immediately, thanks to Scorsese.
And there are little clues that show that Teddy isn't actually who he thinks he is, that Teddy is actually Andrew Latus. Teddy never lights his own cigarettes. Usually Chuck lights his own cigarettes or someone else. The headaches and sickness that Teddy constantly feels only get relieved when he's giving pain relievers, because this insinuates that Teddy is actually having intense withdrawals from his prescribed medication. And although to a first-time viewer it looks as though he's being medicated in a malicious way by the doctors who don't want him finding out more information, it's because, again, he's having withdrawals. And a fun thing also to look at is Teddy's actually similar to Cobb in Inception, because he's plagued with the trauma of his past, and he's living in a fantasy reality, a fantasy world, in order to distract himself from his memories, both coincidentally played by Leo DiCaprio.
So yeah, what we eventually find out by the end of the film, the big twist, we have to talk about it because you can't talk about the movie without talking about this. The hospital, led by Dr. Colley and with assistance from Dr. Sheehan, who is actually Chuck, have established this very elaborate role-playing situation in order to help Teddy come to terms with the fact that he's actually Andrew Latus. And the reason why Teddy is a patient in the hospital is because he murdered his wife after he found out that his wife drowned their 3 children. And so he created the persona of Teddy, the U.S. Marshal, in order to not deal with the reality of the tragedy of his life. He believes that by allowing Teddy to live out this role play, he can emotionally and personally get through to Teddy to make him see who he really is.
And who is Andrew.
Yeah.
And the story in the film and the book are designed to fool the audience into not seeing this twist ending, that Teddy is actually Andrew Latus, and that he's not part of this elaborate scheme to attempt his renewed mental health. But really, you start to believe with Teddy throughout the film that he's really in this conspiracy, that he really finds Rachel in a cave on the side of the island and all this stuff. And it's a really amazing job by Scorsese and by Dennis Lehane, basically, to just trick the reader and trick the audience member.
Yeah, and it's amazing because, like you just said, you're right there with Teddy and you believe him, but there are actually several very small hints and Easter eggs planted throughout the film which prove that Teddy is actually Andrew Latus. I made a list. So when they first get to the island, Chuck struggles to take out his gun from its holster when the guards ask them for them, because no guns are allowed on the premises. And so he's so bad he can't take the gun out of the holster, he ends up just taking the entire holster off his belt and hands it to the guard. And even Teddy looks at him in a strange way, because a U.S. Marshal would be able to take their gun out of their holster, no problem. And then the second time is that as they're walking onto the property of the hospital, there's that inmate that waves at Teddy in particular, and then there's another inmate that looks at Teddy and does that shush sign. So the inmates seem to recognize Teddy. He doesn't know that they recognize him, but they definitely do, because he's an inmate there. And then during the search for Rachel, the entire staff of guards are looking through the island. But during the search, they aren't even doing anything. They're all just kind of sitting around on the cliffs, not putting any effort into searching for Rachel or a dead body, because they know that Rachel doesn't exist, that Andrew Latis, Teddy, made her up, and it's part of the role play. So they're like, what are we doing? I'm not going to look for a body that doesn't exist. And then during the interview with the patients, Teddy goes through a series of interviews to try and figure out clues. There's the older woman, and they're talking, and then she asks Chuck for a glass of water, and Chuck comes over with a glass of water and hands it to her. And then the camera cuts to a close-up of her, and she lifts her hand up, and there's no glass in her hand. And then it cuts to an over-the-shoulder shot, and she puts the glass down. The glass is in her hand now, and it's empty. And so for some reason, the glass disappeared. But the reason why the glass disappeared is because Teddy has a serious aversion towards water because of the death of his kids who were drowned in water. And so he can't be near water, and he can't stand water. And so the glass disappears because he makes it disappear, because he mentally blocks water from his mind whenever he can. And then when Teddy mentions Dr. Sheehan to this woman, she glances for a moment at Chuck, because she knows that Chuck is actually Dr. Sheehan. And then she gets very nervous when Teddy asks about Andrew Latis, because she knows that Teddy is Andrew Latis, and he's also an inmate at the hospital. And then on the next patient, the guy, Teddy starts scratching the paper with the pencil in a very annoying and extreme way, because he knows that patient can't stand something like that kind of noise. Otherwise, how would Teddy know to make that scratching noise with the pencil? So he already knows the inmate so well, because he's also a patient, that he knows that would drive that patient crazy. George Noyce tells Teddy to his face that this is all a game, this is all for him, and that he's not investigating anything, and that Teddy is actually the person who beat Noyce up. That's why he's all bruised and battered.
Throughout this film, we get a lot of glimpses at two specific elements, water and fire. In this film, as we were talking earlier, you mentioned water represents the truth. It represents reality, while fire represents the lies that Teddy tells himself. So when we see Teddy near fire, he's seeing what he wants to see, not what's actually there, like where he's in the fire in the office, when he has hallucinations of the fire of the house burning down that his wife's in, which didn't actually really happen. That's just the story that he created. Remember when Teddy supposedly finds the real Rachel in the cave on the side of the island? She has a fire to shelter her from the hurricane.
And also in those shots of the close-ups, there's fire in the frame each time.
These were all hallucinations that he convinced himself were real. And right after he lights a match, his wife appears in Noyce's cell. And another example is when he blows up the doctor's car, there's a large plume of fire, and he has the hallucination of his wife and his daughter. And the fact that Teddy's wife died in a fire when actually it was Latis who killed his wife. And again, fire represents the lies that Teddy tells to himself, and water again symbolizes the truth, his reality. Teddy is really Andrew Latis and refuses to believe that he was capable of killing his wife. Because, of course, like we said earlier, she drowned their children in water, which is the truth. Water is the truth. And whenever he starts to feel water on him, like when he's under the dripping water, ironically,
in the shower,
ironically, he's completely surrounded by water on this little island. So he's surrounded by his reality and his truth, but he refuses just to look at it. He refuses to even see it.
That's a great point. And then the symbolism is so amazing. And like you said in that shot, when he's holding Dolores from behind her. It's an iconic shot in this movie, and she turns to ashes in his hands, and then she just dissolves, and then the house is burning all around him. If you look closely at the shot, water is dripping out of his hands, so it's like he's letting the truth slip away, and he's letting the hallucination and the fantasy take over. Obviously, it can seem a little extreme to see that a person would invent a whole person to not deal with something, but Teddy, we learn, actually has a history of not dealing with serious issues in his life. And we learn this through Dr. Cawley later in the film, that after the war, when Teddy came home, he became an alcoholic and he drank too much. And he drank to not deal with his problems. And Dolores, his wife, showed really serious signs of having mental illness and mental disturbances, and he ignored every warning sign there was. And there was even a moment where she told him that she had bugs crawling inside her head, and rather than deal with it, he decided to avoid the problem and the situation, and he, instead of taking her to seek help, he moved the family to a rural area, isolated in a home, because he thought that getting away from the city would do the trick. And so he's always avoided dealing with the serious issues in his life, and then creating this entire role play of Teddy is just a next step up from that.
Aesthetically, Teddy's false reality is usually desaturated. You know, when he's at the asylum, everything's just bleak and gray and grim, and then whereas his reality and his memories are usually very saturated, overly saturated, to the extent it's very colorful and real, and just is a counter to the desaturation of his false reality.
There's also this really interesting thing about his flashbacks to the Nazi prison camp. So Teddy's memories in the Nazi prison camp are flashed throughout the film, and in that small story we see that he and his fellow soldiers invaded prison camp. All of the Jews have already been killed and they're frozen in the snow, and then there's the scene where Teddy walks into the office of the SS officer who's already been shot in the face, and he's dying on the ground, and the officer is reaching for his gun. During the scene, there's music playing. It's a Mahler composition. That same song is playing in Cawley's room in the hospital. Now, what's very interesting about this composer is that Mahler was a Jewish composer. Now, Jewish music and art was completely banned and outlawed by the Nazis, so it makes no sense why a Nazi SS officer would be listening to Mahler in a prison camp in his office. And on top of that, this song by Mahler in the movie is a quartet, and in real life, Mahler never finished a quartet composition. So that song actually doesn't even exist in real life. So it begs the question, is that even a real memory, or is that also an invention of Andrew Laetis's mind?
And so Teddy goes throughout this whole conspiracy scheme of trying to escape and trying to reveal and blow up this conspiracy, but they reveal to him that this has all just been an elaborate game to try to coax his mind into reality, to accept what's going on and what's happened into his past. And this is where he finally comes to terms with who he is and who he was and what happened in his past. And there's that emotional scene with the fake gun, and then he passes out in Dr. Cawley's office under this giant kind of spotlight. This lighting is just this giant circle of spotlight, which kind of represents that he's finally seen the light. He's finally come to for the time being.
Yeah.
And then
we learn Dr. Cawley explains that they've done this before, and Teddy has come through before as Andrew Laetis and accepted his past, but then he fell back into the role play of Teddy Daniels. So they're trying this one last time, and Cawley, the whole film, we think he's a villainous character who can't be trusted, but then we learn that nobody cares about Andrew more than Cawley, and he's doing everything he can to save his life.
Because what's going to have to happen now is that he's going to have to get a lobotomy. If this doesn't work, he has to get a lobotomy, which means he'll be turned into virtually a vegetable for the rest of his life.
And that brings to point an actual topic that was heavily debated during this time in America with how to treat psychiatric patients. So traditional doctors, many of them believe that extremely violent and aggressive patients who never took to their treatments, they viewed them as kind of less than human, and as incurable. And so they were always in favor of lobotomizing their patients because it would make them docile and easier to manage and control, because they deemed them unworthy of even being given proper treatment because they didn't think it would ever work. Whereas, and that is represented in the character of Max von Sydow. So he doesn't believe in this role play thing that Colley's doing. He believes in lobotomy. And so that's who Colley's trying to save Andrew from, that doctor right there. Whereas Colley represents a newer wave, a progressive wave of psychiatrists who believe that using creative methods and using care and dignity and love and respect, they could get better results from their patients with time and with effort.
And if you don't know, lobotomy is an old form of psychosurgery that involves severing connections to the brain's frontal cortex. And so it used to just basically, again, turn you into a virtual vegetable.
Yeah. So a few of those patients, when they first arrive, those patients have been lobotomized. They're kind of like robots. They just can do simple tasks, and they can't really think or speak for themselves.
And then Teddy kind of has to come to grips, if he doesn't, with who he is as Andrew Latis.
But then Andrew says that infamous line,
which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man?
So what do you think that means?
To me, every time I've seen the movie and when I read the book, to me, Teddy knows he's Andrew, and he doesn't want to live in this world anymore because he's a dangerous person. He's dangerous to himself. And I think he just wants it all to end, and he wants to just at least live out his days not hurting anybody anymore, because he hurts a lot of people in this movie, and it's something that is a recurring occurrence because he's probably the most dangerous patient at the hospital. And so I think that Andrew pretends that he's Teddy to go to his meeting in the lighthouse, but really he knows he's Andrew and he's accepting this fate.
I agree with you, because Colley says that he wishes he could let Andrew live out this fantasy as Teddy, but he can't because he's so dangerous to the other inmates, to the guards, and to himself. He's the most violent prisoner they have there. And so I totally agree. I think that that last line means that as Andrew Latis, he's a good man. And so he'd rather die as a good man, as Andrew Latis, than live as Teddy, a monster. So I agree. I think that he chooses to get lobotomized.
But again, it's an ambiguous thing, and there's really no wrong answer. It goes either way.
But it's a great ending, and what a great line, man. It's fantastic.
What a twist, too. The first time you see this, it fucking knocks you on your ass.
Yeah.
Big time.
Want to hear something crazy?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mark Ruffalo's character, Chuck, his last name is Aule, A-U-L-E. And so he's Chuck Aule, which sounds like Chuckle, which means he's a jokester or a prankster or a trickster. Yeah.
He also won the role of Chuck after sending Martin Scorsese a fan letter saying how much he wanted to work with him. And the movie also had a $40 million opening weekend take in the U.S. market, which marked a career best for Martin Scorsese, and went on to gross $293 million worldwide, making it his highest-grossing movie in his career until Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, this was a huge hit because Scorsese movies never earned a lot in the box office. They always made a ton with VHS and DVD sales, but with this movie, I think DiCaprio brings a lot of star power to any movie he's in, which is why he can ask for so much money himself. His movies do nothing but make money, so I think having DiCaprio on helped solidify its status as a box office hit. The actual title of the movie, Shutter Island, is an anagram. It makes two anagrams, so it can make truths and lies, and then it can also make truths denials.